Well, I'm LifeBlood. This is George G, and the time is right. Welcome to today's guest, strong and powerful Mark Stouse. Mark, are you ready to do this?
Yeah, of course. It's
All
great
right.
to be here.
Excited to have you on. Mark is the CEO of Proof Analytics. They're a marketing and analytics platform that helps CMOs and CFOs bridge the ROI gap. He's an award-winning B2B CMO and CCO. That is a lot of acronyms, Mark. Definitely
It
excited.
is. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your personal life, some more about your work, and why you do what you do.
Before I do that, I'll just say this. The interesting thing about an acronym, right, or inside baseball type language is that it's really about defining your audience, right? If you are really trying to speak to a certain group of people, you want one way to define that is, do they speak the same language that you do, right? And so while there's a lot of people who say, oh, all that stuff, that you shouldn't use that to communicate. Um, if you look at like the ideal customer portrait idea, the ICP, the whole goal of the ICP is to get things as small as possible, as targeted as possible, right? Within hopefully a large addressable market, right? But your ICP is always a very small subset of that. And so one of the values, and people don't really talk about this, but it's true. One of the values of all these acronyms and the slang and all this kind of stuff that different professions use is it defines the ICP of sorts, right? Are you in that particular club or not in that particular club? So we don't, particularly given the fact that we are also very specialized, we actually don't shy away from all that, because if someone goes to our website, for example, and says, what the hell is this? They're probably not going to buy from us anyway. So now your question was, give that to me again.
I think that's a great way to think and look at it. So thank you. So tell us a little bit about what Proof does and why you are doing it.
So Proof is all about taking, so the problem, so many different ways to kind of answer this question. That's why I'm kind of like doing this. The problem that Proof solves is that people want to understand what might be going to happen in the future in some aspect of their business, right? So this is forecasting using multivariable regression analytics, which is basically the foundation stone of the scientific method. And yet the problem, none of that's new. That all that math has been around in some cases for thousands of years. I mean, one of the algorithms that's in most of the R code packages for regression was actually written by Aristotle, right? So that gives you some sense of what we're talking about here. But the real issue is not the math and not the data. It's how do we make the whole thing work and operationalize it so that it creates relevant answers in time and space. In other words, if you're making a decision, the whole goal of analytics is to be able to make a better decision based upon the insights that you're getting from the analytics. And if those analytics and those insights arrive too late in your operational cadence, they're almost worthless, right? So we automated all of that. And so today we work with companies like Bayer and Samsung and all kinds of folks, right? And it's mainly because at the end of the day, people have this drive to better understand the future. Now we're limited in this regard, right? But people want, the more you can help them look around corners and down the road and all this kind of stuff and understand cause and effect on a reasonably large scale, that's highly valuable. I mean, once upon a time, you would have been considered, a mathematician doing this would have been considered a prophet. right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Some kind of a mystic, right?
yeah, no, I mean, what that which we can't explain is magic, right? And then as soon as we get an explanation, it's science, right? I mean, it's kind of funny the way that works.
Have you always what is your background? How do you find yourself doing this kind of work?
That's a really great question. I mean, I actually started as a journalist. I was a Newsweek reporter and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
I went into big agency PR and politics after that. So I was a speechwriter for the president of the United States at one point.
Well,
Um, and then I kind of felt sort of, I think in some respects, I had a midlife crisis earlier. And so I thought I'd go into the corporate world, somehow thinking that was somehow a cleaner proposition, right? And in some respects, it really is a cleaner proposition, but in other respects, it's not. And so I just kind of ascended inside of large corporations to lead large communications teams globally, marketing teams, CMO, CCO, then the other kind of CCO, which is a chief commercial officer. And so I just kind of gradually iterated. I mean, my whole career has just been a massive iteration of sorts. And so today, so about 5 years ago, I founded Proof. Um, and so now I'm the CEO of an analytics software company, which, um, I mean, I've experienced a lot of change on this topic in the last several decades, but my high school math teachers all think it's hilarious, right? That I'm now doing what I'm doing, right? That's not the Mark Stouse that they remember, at 16, 17 years of age.
I think it's fascinating how you're and I don't know if it's actually both sides of your brain, but using the written word to help somebody write a wonderful speech to help inspire confidence and certainty in the mission of this is the direction I'm taking the
Yep.
country or the city or whatever. And now you're helping CEOs and CMOs and other people within the organization to take and interpret data that they otherwise wouldn't be able to in order to do a very, very similar thing.
No, it's true. I mean, it's if I have a kind of a core ability at a, let's call it a almost metaphysical level, right? The existential level for all of us, right? It's kind of that ability, that syncretic ability to move back and forth between right and left, not just in my brain, but for the benefit of other people, right? And so I tend to be, in a sense, I mean, this has a negative connotation to it, so just bear with me, but in a sense, I tend to be a little bit of a chameleon with people because my job is to be the opposite of what they are. If they're left brain, then I help them understand the right brain.
Hmm.
If they're right brained, I go the other way, right? And because I have kind of an equal facility there, I mean, some people, I hate this word actually, but everyone seems to kind of, immediately recognize what it means. I'm sort of a whisperer, right? Certainly a translator. I'm probably happier with that word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Do you feel like hmm, we have such a pull towards entrepreneurship these days,
Yes.
and people are passionate about it? In your experience, are most entrepreneurs happy? And how are you able to find that sort of, for lack of a better term, happiness in the middle of your brain, balancing the right and the left and helping others do that?
That's a very deep question. So I'm gonna tell you what I have seen. Um, Entrepreneurship at its root is a is all about the search for significance. We cloak it in all kinds of things, right? Oh, I want to be my own boss and, whatever. But trust me, all that stuff is total bull, right? Because you are not your own boss. If you have investors, if you have customers, if you have employees, guess what? You work for them, right? It also, it's a real test, I think, for any person to be an entrepreneur, because if you have existential buttons to be pushed inside of you, that experience will push them. Absolutely guaranteed. It is tailor-made for addicts, right? There is a treadmill aspect to entrepreneurship that means that you never actually get there. Now, you could argue that, well, of course, when you exit, if you sell your company, right, you have gotten there. And yet, how many entrepreneurs do you know, right, that after exit just, go sit on a beach for the rest of their life?
Right.
Right. They can't deal with the idea that they are suddenly not relevant or significant, even if they have $100 million in the bank. Right. It's like it's sort of the unscratchable itch, right? It's sort of like collecting. So I'm a big collector. One of the things I've collected all kinds of things, usually in the realm of my interests, which are historical and technical, right? But like a watch collection, watches for a long time have, last 15 years have been real hot. You go, as a collector, you go through this period where you think, if I can just get that watch, that holy grail watch, that Vacheron Constantin or that Patek Philippe or that Rolex or whatever it is that you consider to be the ne plus ultra of the whole thing, if I can just get that, my collection will be complete and I will be happy. And then you sometimes get it, and that feeling that you're wanting happens, and then it lasts for maybe a month, and then you're off on the next pursuit. One of the things that I learned about collecting is that the pursuit of the collection is the joy of collecting. The ownership is the anticlimax. Unless, of course, you're kind of a hoarder, in which case I guess it's not that way. But for most collectors, they're not hoarders, right? And this is why you see collections churn. This is also why you see serial entrepreneurship. This is why, I'm part of several groups of founders, founding CEOs of that are focused on mental health of founders. One of the things that I think is particularly destructive in the technology startup space is this idea that you have to hockey stick fast, which is the antithesis of sustainability, by the way. So you can't have it both ways. If you're preaching sustainability in other parts of your life and you're working to hockey stick as an entrepreneur, you're at cross purposes with each other, right? With yourself. So I've been in situations, particularly pre-COVID, when we were doing it in person, where I'd be walking in with a founder and it was, all the typical language, I'm killing it, it's awesome, da 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 da, and then you get in this group, which is by definition, in terms of the identity of people, totally radically confidential. And you see the same guy essentially curled up in a chair in a fetal position, and I'm not exaggerating, okay, when I say that, and utterly just shattered. This is not this is what I mean by the destructive forces in entrepreneurship, the addiction in, it's sort of like that old saying that says, if you want to know who you are, or if I want to know who you are, I'm going to give you a lot of money and power, and I will instantly find that out. I mean, within 6 months. The same thing is true about entrepreneurship. It's the ultimate. This is a very generationally dating concept, but it's the ultimate disclosing tablet. When I was a little kid, before I went to the dentist, my mom would give me these little red pills, and I had to chew them up. And wherever I had, stuff on my teeth, whatever, it would turn them kind of red, pink kind of color, right?
Forgot about those.
And that is a powerful metaphor. Unfortunately, I can't really think of a more modern version, but nevertheless, it's a powerful metaphor because that's what entrepreneurship is. It's a disclosing tablet for your soul.
I love it. I think that's super powerful. Is that table stakes for successful entrepreneurship, is being wired that way? Is that a feature or a bug? How do you think about that?
It's both.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why so many startup employees think ultimately that their founder is a narcissistic butthead, right? Right. And because they are, you have to work really super hard in this life to not be selfish. It's an act of intentional will to not be selfish. There's no one who is inherently unselfish. There's grays, right? I mean, some people kind of have a better personality than others, right? But still, and I think that is really true for founders, right? The whole funding process really is a massive trigger on this, because the very thing that is kind of like a highly perishable short-term marker of success, meaning investment, right? Lots of funding pouring into your company, is also diluting the hell out of you. And so if you don't succeed in driving in creating a huge pie, so that even your much smaller piece is worth more than your former dominant piece, right? Then you've got a big problem, right? And you rapidly find yourself in the situation where you're effective. You may be the founder and all that stuff, may even be the founding CEO, but you are now really just an employee, And so this, at one level, there's nothing wrong with that intrinsically, but it psychologically really triggers massive selfishness. I mean, I was just reading this article this morning. Right now, it's in something called The Information, and it's about all these. The headline is "Startup Workers Find That Founders Cashed Out When They Couldn't." Right, so it's all about all these founders in the last year, before obviously everything went to hell, who were secretly selling fairly significant portions of their ownership and cashing out early, while at the same time denying their employees the ability to do the same thing. Okay, this is a completely understandable impulse for a normal, selfish human being. Okay. That does not mean that it's right. This does not mean that it should have happened, right? But it's a great exemplar of what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. It requires a virtuous human being to not to be selfish, because we all, our impulse is to satiate our needs and to
Yeah.
be wise enough and strong enough and forward thinking enough and all of those things
And also
to
you can,
act
it's
against it.
important to say this, you can go too far in the other direction,
Mhm.
right? You can lay yourself down, you can deny your own interests to an unhealthy degree, and that in a way ultimately puts you at risk disproportionately to everybody else around you, right? And we're not, as founders or as people, right? We're not usually, there are exceptions obviously, but we're not usually called to lay down our life for people as a normal matter of course. It may happen that way, right? um I mean, as a history guy, you know, I can give you lots of stories where, particularly in combat, where that was the way it turned out and that was necessary. But it's not normal. And so there is a balance that you have to strike, right? And sustainability doesn't just apply to everyone outside of yourself, it applies to you as well, right? You have to be sustainable.
Mm-hmm. I think that's well said. Mark, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people learn more about you? How can they engage with you? And where can they find Proof Analytics? And who should be looking for Proof Analytics?
So they, you know, I'm actually very active on LinkedIn. So that's probably the easiest way to find me. You can also find me on Twitter at Mark Stouse, all one word. Um, the Proof website is proofanalytics.ai. And as far as who should be interested in this, if you are a business leader, if you're a marketing leader, and you're being asked right now, hey, what am I getting for all that money that I just been spending with you for all this time? And how do we know that we're spending the right amount of money relative to the circumstances in the marketplace, the headwinds and the tailwinds and all this kind of stuff? And how do I know that you're actually executing based upon what you could be doing, right? So this is the issue of forecasting. If that's your need, right, we can do it better, faster, and cheaper than anybody on the planet. So that's who should be looking out for us.
Love it. Well, if you enjoyed this as much as I did, show Mark your appreciation and share today's show with a friend who also appreciates good ideas. Go to proofanalytics.ai and check out all the great things that Mark is working on. You can find Mark on LinkedIn and Twitter. It's Mark. The last name is spelled Stouse. Love it. Thanks again, Mark.
Hey, thank you, man. Have a great day.
And until next time, fighting the good fight, we are all in this together.